Okay, welcome back. We're still talking about eutrophication, and I wanted to bring in a few extreme examples and also potential impacts on humans as a result. Okay, again, extreme system, a lot of algae, a lot of growth in macrophytes, and in some cases we end up getting this critter here called Pfiesteria. And you may have heard of this in the past, but this can be a major problem in estuaries, which are generally nitrogen starved. So nitrogen comes in these systems and increases the growth of microorganisms. Pfiesteria is one of them, and you may have heard of red tides. Pfiesteria is a type of dinoflagellate that can grow in great quantities, causing these red tides. And initially, we knew it had negative impacts on fish. You would see tons of dead fish rising to the surface during these blooms, and we knew Pfiesteria was bad news because the fish, their flesh would degrade. And there was a lot of initial research on this bug. They brought it into laboratories, and they tried to be very careful. They're putting on gloves and everything like that. But it was even more dangerous than they initially assumed. In fact, one of the primary research groups involved in this discovered this, with a really bad situation in their lab. Some of their workers were having brain damage from neurotoxins that were released in the air, and their head technician couldn't find her way home and couldn't remember her name after a while. Now, happily, most of this was reversible, but this just shows you that very large human impacts in regards to health can occur because of eutrophication. Okay, dead zones is another environmental impact. Marine habitats, like I said, are nitrogen starved. And you can see that, you can imagine all the fertilizer application in the Midwest for our agriculture, because that's where it's mainly centered. All that runoff goes into the Mississippi. And at this time, it's gone down into the Gulf of Mexico, and because of eutrophication, there's an area the size of New Jersey down there, which is basically a dead zone. The oxygen levels near the bottom are so low that nothing that requires oxygen can survive there. So very large situations. Also, the Baltic Sea in Europe is a great example of eutrophication in action. There are large portions of that sea that's surrounded by Russia, Sweden, Germany, Poland, that is completely dead. Okay. Something else we have to consider when we're looking at eutrophication is not only the nutrients that are added, but just organic hydrocarbons that are released through sewage have an impact on the environment. So in this cartoon, we have a sewage treatment plant. These hydrocarbon chains are put in as sewage, and as it goes downstream, bacteria work on this. They decompose it, they eat it up, and they require oxygen. So oxygen levels decrease. And this is related to the concept of BOD, biochemical or biological oxygen demand. And you can see because of these inputs, it rises and causes oxygen to fall. Eventually it gets cleaned up, but in localized areas of rivers and streams, you can have a huge impact. Okay, let's look at this slide here. This will give you an idea of how this localized concept of eutrophication can be important. Here we have a stream with a downstream section and an upstream section. The upstream section, not a lot of macrophytes, not eutrophied, and the downstream section, there's eutrophication, a lot of macrophytes. And we can see a large change in oxygen levels over the course of a day here. So in certain circumstances, what you have is the plant is respiring. It's using oxygen, so the levels drop. And then it's photosynthesizing during the day, and they go up. And it's extreme because there are a lot more macrophytes here. Upstream, fewer macrophytes, not much of a difference during the day. Again, the average DO, dissolved oxygen content, isn't as important here as the change during a day. And you can see that might be important for management. All right, so, basically when you look at our water use in the United States, it went up for quite some time. It's kind of leveled off, but if we look at what are we using for our water for, believe it or not, a lot of it is for thermal electric. And still, a good supply for irrigation. And, this is why our systems are so stressed. Even thermal electric, you can talk about thermal pollution, and that can contribute to eutrophication as well. Where is the water coming from? A lot of it is surface water, the majority of it. You can see that in the blue here, but also groundwater is important. And you can see the population rise and the demand rise going up mostly together until recent years. Okay, so how can you control eutrophication? If you just look at phosphorus, there are some ways you can do it. Wastewater treatment, and we'll go into more detail on that a little later. Another thing that was important was taking phosphorus out of detergents. This was really killing the Great Lakes for a while, and that's helped a bit. Reducing use of fertilizer, and also controlling agricultural runoff, keeping the fertilizer on the fields. And another simple way is if you're having problem with phosphorus in manure, reduce phosphorus in animal feed. So that's a simple way around that potentially. Okay, and again, sewage treatment plants, a biggie, especially in the developed world. All right, so if you look at treatment of sewage, it's really divided into primary treatment. That's the floatables and what we can catch in a grit chamber. But there's also secondary treatment where we have digesters, anaerobic and aerobic, that can be used to break down the BOD and also pull out some of the bad nutrients. And eventually, potentially, you can use this for fertilizer. Another neat system, we'll get into ecological engineering later, is you do some of the initial primary and secondary treatment, then you pour this stuff on plants like cattails that can pull up heavy metals, and you can use the effluent as a fertilizer to grow plants like flowers and trees and also lawns. Instead of using fertilizer, which leaches into waterways, you can use the nutrients already in waterways and use that for your lawn. Okay, so we're going to stop there, and in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about Onondaga Lake as a case study because it's really tied to eutrophication. So I'll see you next time.